All right, let's go ahead and get started. To everyone who's joined, thank you for joining. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about prefab compliance and the realities of where AI can help. Today we have some couple of great people joining the call, Alexi and Steve. And I think we should start off by talking about where you guys sit respectively in the world of prefab. Prefab has a lot of different flavors. It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I think a good place to start is to level set and understand kind of what perspectives you're bringing to the table. Um, Steve, maybe we can start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what plant prefab does and kind of where you sit in the world of prefab?
Yeah, so we design and manufacture customized building components. We do both panels and modules. And we're doing this for single and multifamily housing. So our clients are individuals, developers, nonprofits who are doing everything from homes to affordable housing projects, hospitality, market rate rentals or condos, multi-unit projects, so multiple homes on a property. We tend to focus on areas where land and labor is expensive and scarce. Um, we work with any architect, so we're capable of doing a wide variety of designs. We've worked with some world-class architects, people like Ray Cappy and Brooks Scarpa. Just actually finished our first affordable multifamily project with them. And we, as I said, build customize modules and panels. So panels like a part of a wall or a floor or roof, and a module is comprised of the panels that we manufacture. Um, but it's volumetric, so it's part or an entire room or multiple rooms, and these components are installed in a day or two, could be longer depending upon the size of the project, with cranes.
Awesome. And maybe you want to tell us a little bit about the facility that's in your background.
Yeah, we operate out of a 270,000 square foot facility that was built for us in Arvin, California. So we're about 20 miles south of Bakersfield. And it's a fully automated facility. It's the only in the country built to do both panels and modules. And we are one of only two automated prefab plants on the West Coast. The others in Northern California. We're the only one that also does. We do multifamily, but we also do single family. So we're very, very involved with rebuilding projects in Altadena, Pacific Palisades, and Malibu. And oh, I should, sorry, first of, there may be other plugs, but we have an open house April 7th, from 10:30 to 1:30. We have weekly tours, but this will be a big event. You can meet partners and architects who work with us and see some really cool projects. I'll put an invite. I don't know if I have the ability to put in the chat, but I'll put an invite. Oh, I can't do that. Maybe you can, Brian, where people can RSVP if they're interested.
Yeah, we'll send out a recap and include the link. Great, thanks for that. And Alexi, you're also bringing a very interesting perspective from a couple of different starting points. One with Mighty Buildings, but also with what you're currently doing at Build Tech. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about kind of the perspective you're bringing from prefab to this discussion.
Yeah, at Mighty Buildings, we had different product lines in prefab. Like first, we started with a new novel materials, right? So we invented the material that was introduced to the construction industry. The first product line was actually volumetric modular that incorporated some of the 3D printed elements. There was heavy lifting on the compliance side for that to make it permittable and approved. So then we switched to panelized construction, and we were able to print and produce different type of panels. then the complexity was less about the certification of the material, but more to get compliance with the, custom geometries and walls that are not like, traditional walls with the different jurisdictions. So we delivered more than 60 homes across different states, mostly in California, also Illinois, Florida, Oregon, and we delivered a couple of units in Dubai. So that was with Mighty Buildings. Another thing is, so I currently run Build Tech Ventures. We've invested in early stage construction real estate technology companies, pre-seed seed. So I also prefer to be, hands-on involved with a lot of operators because I'm an operator myself. And my heart always belongs to like robotics, prefab, new materials. And when we assess different companies, I always ask them about like, their compliance roadmap, understanding of with the strategy to serve first one state and then go to other jurisdictions on a state level, or like, maybe with it, like if they have one development signed, like is it translatable to something that they can replicate with different jurisdictions, or it will require product modification?
Great. Sounds great. So, really the topic for today's webinar is prefab compliance and how AI can address different pain points therein. But compliance means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Um, and when you're talking about prefab, you mentioned uh, you're running into compliance at multiple levels, at the product standards level, at the permitting and jurisdiction level. Um, I think it'd be helpful to hear, and maybe we can start with you on this, Alexi. Um, you know, Across Mighty Buildings or across the portfolio companies that you work with at BuildTech, what end up being more the sticky points around compliance that you see? What are some examples of challenges that you've run into when it comes to that compliance roadmap that you mentioned?
Mm-hmm. Uh, well, where to start? I would say like, look, my experience and story may be like a little bit different. It's more related to those who are introducing new materials and new building products to the industry. Because typically, like, for new material, if it's not just replacement of the existing one, or it's something that allowed to build new things. But like for instance, in our case, it was building elements with different geometries, right? So there was no standard for that, and a lot of consultants as well as external, uh, agencies who are providing services and providing the building these roadmaps were kind of like scratching their head and trying to pull like different standards. But at certain point, it was literally like we had some stories related to. So we get to the consultant, they provide us with certification roadmap, but then like down the process, they engage someone else, and someone else will drop like a couple of other standards saying like, oh, we also maybe need to be compliant with this. So I think that was in, I mean, from a founder perspective, obviously I push my team kind of like, okay, present me the understanding of what's going to be the compliance roadmap for the product, right? For each iteration of the product. So then I'm reviewing it with my team. I'm committing to this, like, assigning the resources. And imagine like, months later or like a few weeks later, there is another, oh, we actually need to do this and that also. So in this process, somewhere in between, I think my team developed a skill set of pushing back on certain requests from experts. It was quite kind of like interesting dynamic because first, obviously, like new expert entering the room, like they know their stuff, right? But at the end of the day, like they just offloading some of the things that might not be necessary, like must have or needed for this specific use case, right? So it was sort of like a dance of going like, oh, okay, we're adding three more standards, and my team reviewing it and pushing back, saying like, oh, maybe only one of it is actually accurate, like acceptable and must need like have for this specific use case. So it was like a lot of back and forth with different advisors and consultants, I would say. Once it was done, the next part shifted to for the team to have obviously, we retained like external architects and engineers. We also had internal architects and engineers, but our internal architects and engineers were mostly focused on kind of like geometry, printability, and of like code compliance to the degree. But architects on the record were engaging external consultants for ADA compliance, for fire, like weatherproofing, and so on. And that's where they also was some nuances related to like, oh, we need to do this additional test and that additional test. And it was like somewhat late in the process. That was a little bit of a surprise to us. But again, this like a new product in nature that we introduced to the industry, right? So that was you know I think it might if my team had some sort of a roadmap right away that they can guide or like while they do the changes they can get the updated roadmap like instantly, not waiting for like a few weeks. That would accelerate our process drastically.
And so just to be sure, the stakeholders that you're dealing with at Mighty Buildings, you have your own internal engineering team working on these novel materials and assemblies. You're working with external architects and engineers. And you started to mention a couple of standards bodies as well. Is that right? What standards bodies were you working with?
First, we started with UL under its laboratory for certification of our material. Then we obviously UL is referring to number of standard from ASTM and other test bodies. On the consultants were involved from different labs. That was rearrangement. Uh, Another thing for some structural test and structural integrity of the design. So that was architecture of a record. So for one of the project I can mention it was Bureau Hubbard, and they were overseeing our uh, basically structural design and MEP design. That's where like it required some additional tests on site when we did the first deployment of a single family home unit. But then there were also consultants, and we also had internal resources. Like as we started with consultants, and we kind of grown into having an internal expertise for
Mhm.
going with the permits for with the local jurisdictions.
Got it. And one last question, and we can move to you, Steve. But when you're talking about someone telling you, oh, you're missing these standards or you need this and this to get approved, who is in that kind of list of different stakeholders you're working with? Who is it that's telling you hey, ultimately, hey, this is what you need? Like who is kind of giving you the additional guidance as you move towards approval? Is that directly from testing labs or from the city or who's kind of like at
The
the end of the line?
Yeah, the tricky part for us was that until we have a finalized set of plans, we were not able to get this answer from, let's say, the city or the local jurisdiction. Luckily, for instance, in California, there is a FBH program, factory built housing program that allowed to streamline basically certification for building elements coming from the factory. That was super helpful for us. But I would say like preliminary meetings with the CT as well as the final review. That's where uh, we were kind of confirming our compliance and everything that we were submitting. But in majority cases, it was my team as well as later on we switched to ICC, so we got ICC as reports. And with ICC, we kind of like engage them to provide the certification roadmap, like what we need to be compliant with if we're going, let's say, to Florida. Florida was like one of the extremes for us is like what climate zones we can cover in California because of earthquakes, fire, and so on, and what others like requirements we need to meet to deploy in Florida. And Florida also like has different jurisdictions, like Miami-Dade, they have a different requirements compared to like in other jurisdictions in Florida. And we had like very I honestly don't remember how many pages we had for these certification roadmaps that we have at hand just to present to different developers and owners. But to be honest, like we were seeking guidance from ICC. Initially, there was no one telling us like what we can do until we
Mhm.
get certification with UL.
So it's kind of like you're trying to study for a test, but you don't know what's on the test, and you won't know until until you get to the test.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Now, Steve, as I understand it, you're not introducing kind of like novel materials in the same way that Mighty Buildings was
Right.
doing. So you may have a slightly different perspective on this. What are the types of compliance challenges that you or your team kind of have encountered over time?
Um, well, I mean, there's all sorts of OSHA work-related compliance issues, right? But you don't really mean that, or
Yeah,
do
I mean, I'm not actually talking. Yeah, I mean, I imagine setting up the factory itself was a compliance endeavor in itself, but actually, I'm
well, an
talking more
ongoing
about
basis. OSHA's ongoing worker safety, things like that. But I think you really mean in the product domain, right? Yeah. So
product and permitting.
yeah. So we're not unlike what Dimitri, I mean Alexei was doing. We don't have specific products that we were certifying or materials. We have projects, and the projects need to conform to code. And there are kind of two dimensions to that. First, important context in California, and frankly, I think it's this way in every state. We've worked in a bunch, but I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's this way everywhere. A panelized and a modular based building is considered, let's talk about homes, are considered legally essentially the same as a site built home. They can't be discriminated against with respect to zoning or financing or insurance, anything. There's no disclosure requirements on title. It's, as I said, from a legal standpoint, the same. As such, when you are working on getting a project built, you go through the same planning review and approvals, whatever your zoning requirements are, zoning overlays, specialty agency reviews, if it's in coastal or WUI area, high fire hazard zone, exactly the same review. But then it's a bifurcated process for your building permit. The local municipality, if it's in Santa Monica or Los Altos or wherever, reviews the plans for the local work, typically foundations, grading foundations, and approves those drawings, issues your permit, and inspects as they normally do on site. The state uh, is responsible for reviewing the offsite permit set or the permit set for the offsite components. They inspect at the factory. If it's a module that we're shipping, the walls come closed with certificates signed by the inspectors, and the local municipality has no authority to go behind the walls, frankly, to do any inspections of any work that's in the domain of the state. And in this state, it's not this way in every state, but in this state, California actually outsources it to one of 13 private permitting agencies or review agencies. And they're private companies who have to compete for the work. So they're super efficient. We typically get our permits issued 2 to 3 weeks after submission. Um, and really easy to schedule at the factory. A, fair process, tough as they should be. But they know what to expect with us. We know expect what to expect with them. We tend to get through these things really efficiently. So that's this permitting thing, which in general is a challenge, sort of writ large across all classes of real estate, new construction, is a bit more efficient. In fact, a lot more efficient than certainly the process with lots of local municipalities.
So that basically the state level certification of the offsite construction is in your opinion pretty streamlined at this point, and then the real friction occurs at the local municipality level where the permitting could drag for quite a bit longer. Is that right?
More often than not, yeah.
Yep. And it sounds like you've been doing this for a couple of decades at this point. So some of the compliance pathway, even at that state level, probably feels quite natural and streamlined from your perspective. But for people who are just getting started and maybe, who are maybe launching new prefab companies, and it can feel quite daunting in terms of what is required to navigate all of that. Do you have any, if let's say an aspiring entrepreneur says, "Hey, I think that there's a new approach to prefab that I want to get off the ground. I just don't know that much about how all of the compliance and permitting works." Um, what kind of advice would you offer to that aspiring founder as to how to learn and get up to speed? Is it just learn by doing? Is it, just go to the websites and do research? Is it here are some consultants or people to talk to? What is the kind of advice that, either of you guys would offer to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Well, first of all of the above. I really try to talk you out of doing a factory. I mean, quite frankly, and Lexi's laughing because he knows it's hard. There have been a lot of failures here along the way. Factories want to stay full. That's it. There's some folks out there doing micro factories. That's certainly an easier way to get into this. Uh, I would, if you have a product idea, I would work with factories like us, frankly, who do custom or contract manufacturing. But my first thing would be to try to talk you out of it, unless you're a developer. And if you're a developer with your own pipeline and you're confident you're going to keep that facility full. Now that's very different. But and then I mean, what you have to do, it's not daunting. The Department of Housing has, good documentation about you've got to be inspected and certified, but it's all published what you have to do, and you have to set up certain standards of inspections and of course there's a whole separate set of OSHA rules around this, but it requires um, of course work and diligence, but not this isn't uh, the permitting part is not a black arts. It's a pretty transparent set of requirements that you have to do.
No, Alexia, I imagine you probably get people approaching you from the venture angle and asking you, what is the pathway? What are the types of questions you get, and what is the advice that you offer as it
Uh,
relates to compliance
let's maybe start with the
specifically?
different profiles, right? So one of the profiles, someone doing a new building material, a new building product, right? My first question is always going to be about compliance and certification, right? Where is your certification roadmap? Because I know it may take like, a year and a half easily, right? In some cases. So that's where um, yeah, my suggestion would be find a partner. Even like in some cases, it might be corporate venture arm of big corporation that might help with testing, or at least like they will guide them through their internal labs, just to accelerate this process. So it's more building the partnership so that they are not going through traditional process, because traditional process is going to be very slow for the reasons that I mentioned before, right? So no one knows like what the right standards to apply to this. So they will try to apply as many as possible, which is like technically is good, but for the founder it's good to be there, but they need to show traction by a certain time, right? So it's on the building side and building materials and building product side. For factories, I agree with Steve. Like, if you're fully verticalized player, and that's a play, you kind of like, have a partner, for instance, who is has a demand for a certain amount of like buildings, and that can fill out the factory, go for it, deploy the factory, uh, and so on. If it is, I'm actually a big fan of microfactories. That was one of the concepts that we were trying to build out at Mighty. But I'm closely tracking the companies doing microfactories with different deployments, including in Europe, for instance. And there are a couple of, actually more than a couple of companies in the US right now that doing like microfactories. But microfactory might have like two different connotations in terms of like how we speak about it. So one is it's easy to deploy and that can be permanent. Another one is easy to deploy, but then can be relocated. So the second one I have a term for them. I call them flying factories. It's kind of easy to move from one side to another. Surprisingly, both of them they have kind of like they need to be permitted, they need to be approved, and that's still a big portion of the timeline. By the way, interesting thing, like it's I just remembered on like last Friday, an investor of mine who we do deals together sent me a note about one company. I will not tell the name, but it is a prefab company, and using automation, robotics for panel production from their factory. They're actually on a good track and so on. The founder is actually great in terms of like knowing all this stuff, and the investor he is more from like robotics, automation, manufacturing space, and his concern was mostly about the prefab was not successful because of the permitting timelines. I sent him in response the link to this webinar saying like, oh, that's interesting that you mentioned in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, let's talk about compliance and prefab without the hype. I think that to underline what Steve mentioned, if we have a prefab factory and the factory is not filled with orders, then it's going to be like always a struggle, right? And the reason for that is earlier in a timeline of any project, this timeline for local approval or like building permit is going to take like a lot of time for local kind of like the approval, like the whole foundation, utilities, and so on. And it might delay the project. And then, for the factory, typically you're going to have inconsistent pipeline, right? So for instance, you might have like, times when you need to produce for 3 projects and then the times when you need to produce for 0, right? And it's not a good way of doing manufacturing. So yeah, those are the things that I would advise to any founder to think about. Haven't seen successful microfactories at scale. Like, I have seen like, 1 or 2 pilot deployments, but closely, looking after, like watching and observing how it's going to evolve.
So if I hear you guys correctly, I think Alexei, what you're saying is, when it comes to like product certifications coming from UL or ASTM, especially for novel products, just it's kind of a knowledge problem. It's hard to know what are the requirements even, right? And then I think Steve, what you're saying, kind of at the permitting level, it's pretty straightforward to know what permits you need, and that process you can research, and there's transparency around what that process looks like. But maybe the challenge becomes making sure that you're not making mistakes, like I don't know, with related as relates to ADA, or that your construction drawings are compliant with local code. Would you say that's a challenge at all, or are you
Oh
running?
yeah, yeah,
Do you have? Yeah.
absolutely. But Brian, your question was about the compliance for factories, not project compliance. Now that's a mess. I mean, you in a bigger city like Los Angeles, you've got all these different agencies or departments that have to review your plan, from the fire department, uh, the utilities, the building and safety, and they all have different requirements. And yeah, some are published, and other times you find like, what? I didn't even know about this. So that is more uh,
More of a
that's
dark
one of the
art,
reasons why
is
it
what
takes,
you're saying.
that's one of the reasons why it takes so much time because various groups have to go through your plans, get the comments back. You've got to respond. There can be multiple, there are often, certainly for the bigger the project is, the more rounds there are of these questions and answers. There's this phrase in the industry, not to add complication, but RTFP, because you'll often get questions about things that are on the plan. So, read the effing plans. That's oftentimes what your response are like. It's there, but so you're even dealing with that. You can be dealing with people who give you different information. You have different reviewer. They saw different things. They have a different interpretation. Some of this I am describing happened. The planning review is a little bit, dare I say, more systematic and logical when you get into inspections, like more on site than at the factory. That's where this gets even more subjective. But still, it very few people have ever said that this is an efficient process. And that's why, more and more groups like you are thinking about how can we use AI to make this process much more efficient. There are huge opportunities, particularly, I mean, what you really want is in real time as you are making plans. Let me get a read, do it. Am I going to have problems here? So that by the time you
Mhm.
submit, you're in pretty good shape. And oh, by the way, they've got some AI, so, and maybe the two are communicating real time, almost like autonomous driving, where
Yeah,
you're helping each other avoid stuff before it even happens. That'll happen, and that'll be great for the industry.
gotcha. Okay, so when you were talking about the transparency, you were talking about the factory compliance,
Yeah, I thought
not
your
less so
question
the
was about
project
that.
finance side. Gotcha. Okay.
Exactly. I thought your
So yeah,
question.
on the project compliance side, it sounds like yeah, some of these it's not published as clearly or as consistently as you might hope.
And you're dealing with various groups,
And
and they have their own
do you
cadence.
find that yeah,
Sorry.
and I guess you know what you're talking about, you work with external engineers and architects. Obviously, you have to bring the project through the final permitting compliance process. Do you knowledge and transparency problem exists for the engineers and architects as well? Or is it kind of like a problem throughout, or is there one group of people in this equation where the process is very clear and transparent and the knowledge is accessible?
No, it's a problem throughout. I mean, that's why you have a permitting process. Like, I mean, all the architects and their consultants, the structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, sprinklers, they're all, and the more experienced they are, the more they know the gig, particularly if it's in a particular city. And they're of course trying to design per code, design per requirement, make everything um, the right way. But they miss stuff, stuff changes, and that's why this process exists, because it
Yeah.
gets kicked over to another group who are going through it and finding things and asking questions and
Yeah. So I'd love to transition and start talking a little bit about how, you mentioned AI, but how you see AI being used today. And, I think there may be kind of like two parts to this question because I think we're still in the early innings of how AI is being used and deployed. So maybe there's the promise of what AI can do in the future. But let's start maybe with just today, kind of without the hype, so to speak. Uh, do your teams And this question, if either one of you can take, do your teams, do you see people using AI today to prevent mistakes in drawings or to have a better visibility into compliance pathways? Um, and if you do see your teams using AI, would be curious to know if they're using purpose-built tools or if they're using, ChatGPT and Claude or something else.
Alexi, you want to go?
Yeah, the one that I observed, like the simplest one, is just throwing the standards into Notebook LM and interacting with them, right? Against like, your questions. So navigating through very complex, sort of like, I don't know, folder or like, 10 or like in some cases, dozens of different standards, including links and so on, and helping just people to navigate with specific questions related to some design aspects. It's I have seen people using it, not on like, that's I haven't seen anything more or less uh, kind of like where AI can help with the design process, to be honest. I think that's a huge opportunity. Maybe like in integration. I'm sure there are tools like that for code compliance, highlighting the things and so on. But as Steve mentioned, there are so many people involved in this and so many consultants they need to sign off. But maybe like someone is building right now the feature of kind of I changing something, my engineer or an architect is changing something in drawings, and then it's highlighting, hey, this standard might be not like this might not be according to this standard, so you need to revisit something else, right? Because then it's becoming like this kind of like a loop of then an engineer need to review, then another consultant need to review, then back to engineer, back to architects, and and so on. Another use case, but I have seen AI being used like that. However, for instance, where there's a previous conversation, it reminded me of one typical approach where, for instance, as Mighty Buildings, we spoke with a developer, and developer engage architect, someone else, and they will say something like, "Oh, we have also this standard that is required for our local jurisdiction." Right. And then you need to explore this, like if it's applied to your product, if it's like there's going to be, so that's where like we need to engage local, either local expert advisor or directly engage with the local jurisdiction if they're open to that. Some cases they're just super busy and it's hard to get the like all the answers. But sort of like how to get this finite number of standards that we need to be compliant with, right?
Hmm.
Because always you can like interact with Notebook LM or like upload to some other like Claude tool. But then I was sure that this is the number of standards we need to be compliant with, so there are more. Again, this is more on the product side. If it's more repeatable process, I think it's easier. But again, different jurisdictions have different requirements. That's I hope where AI can shrink this kind of like first exploratory, where what is the number of standards, and then highlight whenever I do the change. I have some sort of like I don't know the natural language assistant that can ask like, okay, I want to change this window location or like these stairs. What should I take into account to be compliant? And then it's like this, and that.
So basically, I think you're saying, well, on the Notebook LM and Claude side, people will upload a lot of information to these platforms and try to, and maybe it speeds things up a little bit, but it's not removing the need for an expert, and it also doesn't solve the kind of like more iterative challenge of design and feedback.
No, not
Is
yet,
it?
not yet.
Yeah.
I know that some people, like, some companies are developing software for jurisdictions to streamline the permitting process, but it's more on execution side, right? So that they can quicker process they can process the backlog faster,
Mhm.
right? And it's accelerating the process per application, kind of like highlighting, okay, this is typically like it looks like compliant based on this, and that. So AI generated report, and it works on both sides, right? So you upload it, and rather than flagging the mistakes early, and then on the other side, like it's transparent for the city jurisdiction, so they can faster make a decision, approve or return with comments.
Steve, how's your team using AI, if at all, in kind of to help reduce some of these code compliance and permitting challenges?
Or not yet. Yeah.
And okay, so that's kind of where we are today. It sounds like, there's maybe some homespun options, but maybe nothing that can replace an expert quite yet. Where do you see this? Where are you guys excited about, opportunities for AI to play a role? Um, like if you could kind of, you can't wave a magic wand to make somebody show up to work and work 3 hours more in the day, right? Because like uh the municipal employees, have their schedules and whatnot. But if you could wave like a technology wand to make um some of the process easier, what would your kind of like magic AI wand do for the future?
Well, it's happening. I mean, apparently LA County is using some AI system to help expedite permit review. Um, I think Los Angeles is testing one too, but LA County is definitely using one, and I think I heard Malibu is too. We're mostly not the architect or the designers for our project, so we don't. Um, it's the architects who are really on the front lines of this. We deal with state submissions, but honestly, like it's 2 to 3 weeks for us to get our permits after submission. So sure, like would we want that improved? Yeah, that'd be great. But that's not a bottleneck, it's the local guys.
Yeah.
So it'd be great when the state employs a similar system. Hell, maybe it'll be permits within days. But again, we're not the long pole in the process. It's the local guys, and more are employing these third party services that there's I think there's SaaS-based models, and they're helping to expedite initial review, um, some of the more obvious uh, conflicts and RFIs that the city would issue. And of course, it's AI, so it's learning, right? They're just going to get better and better. So that's
So
exciting.
your hope is on the review side, and then I guess also on that like architectural engineering side, for the information to be commonly accepted and
Yeah.
applied, so that on both of those, that can be kind of a little bit more streamlined. You don't
And
make.
then,
Yeah.
look, this could, of course, be a much longer discussion, but just in a different area. But I mean, like, I'd love a camera in every part of our work, and it's in real time, letting our team know, like, that's per plan, that's per code, or not. Yeah, right. It's 24/7 inspections.
Yep.
AI eventually will do that, right?
Alexia, where do you see the opportunities if you could wave your AI wand?
I think one might be to accessibility of standards from different sources like UL, HDM, ISO, and so on. So if I can easily, because typically it's like a mess, you need to pull one standard from one, another standard referring to another standard, and so on. So it's uh, I joked, I remember, like, there was a situation. So my desk was next, there was an architect, and there was another person who's doing software engineering. My joke was that the person on the architect side was actually pulling different standards because there is dependencies. Now, saying it's similar to kind of like, how you need to install the package for the node, and node is pulling like different packages because of the dependencies for installing certain software. It's a similar way. But for standard, there is no automatic way of kind of like going through them and understanding the context, what's relevant, what's not relevant. And I think building something like that for both jurisdiction as well as customer, so they have one interface and they can navigate through this, like, using the same kind of like tool might be really helpful. Another one is I think is ongoing check whenever I do modifications to my product. I can actually iterate faster with AI, understanding like, okay, if there's this, like, I can do it even if it's heavy, maybe like weekly, like, if it's possible to do daily, it's amazing. So I can get the feedback in terms of like, okay, here are the things that I need to pay attention to. Here are the red flags that I need to be like, modified in any case. Another thing is like as I mentioned, like with when different developers from different jurisdictions are approaching, they have different requirements and standards that what they would like to mention, and having kind of like easy way to get the compliance roadmap right away within like 1 day or two might be really helpful in these conversations.
Well, I thank you guys for all of that. I'd like to offer a little bit of perspective from Kite Compliance, the company that I'm building, and then to the extent that we have any, we can open up for questions from the audience. Um, so uh, brief background on kite compliance. We've been working on building kind of an AI-powered system to help manage both product and jurisdiction level compliance. We've been building it for the past year. And so I see a lot of the tools that are out there, and obviously have a point of view as to what the right thing to build is. First, on the tools that are out there, I think there's a lot of kind of point in time tools that are being developed that do things like use computer vision to check the code compliance of construction drawings. And that can save just tons of rework, save tons of manual review. And those, I think, are some really exciting technologies that are being developed right now. But that's kind of a single point in time. Um, the viewpoint that we have at Kite Compliance is that the real opportunity with AI here is that for the first time, you're able to bring to this world of unstructured data compliance, like interpretations from different consultants and from different experts. You're able to kind of build a system of record. Um, and if you can build a system of record um, that everybody references and cites, then you have a common vocabulary across all of those stakeholders between architects, engineers, product developers, testing bodies, um, and from there you really have an opportunity to kind of avoid the rework that is created when you have a game of telephone across all those different stakeholders. So the system of record opportunity is one kind of critical viewpoint that we have, and the other viewpoint is that um, you know, I don't think there's a world in which the human element gets removed anytime soon. And I think, as you guys have said, a lot of this is about people and relationships. And uh, um, so I think that any system that tries to fully replace the human is that's not kind of the path forward that we see that makes sense. So building an AI powered system that truly accommodates and integrates the human expert is, I think, a critical part of what needs to be built. So kind of the plug for Kite is we're trying to build the system. If anybody is interested in that kind of in cooperating or working on this AI powered system of record together, then yeah, we'd love to hear from you. So that's that. Let me open up to the questions. So we've got one here that I'll read out loud to Alexia and Steve, and we'll let you guys respond. So question is, can't the site planning and design process inform the manufacturer in relative real time, utilizing DLT and machine learning to dynamically inform the design process, LCA, circular methodology, etc.?
Be awesome.
Yeah, but I think
Not
infrastructure it
yet.
just
Yeah. I
I
mean,
mean for that go ahead, Steve, sorry.
we literally we get the architecturals. Most of our architects are BIM based, but not all of them. We'll get their files typically at like a 50% CD set. And then we have to use DFM software. We used to use uh, CADWorks, but now we use something else to create a separate manufacturing model that fully coordinates the SMEPS because the architect platforms don't allow you a bunch of reasons. They're not designed for manufacturing yet. We can't embed the machine code that we need. But yeah, I mean, when that becomes a seamless process, that's going to be incredible. But oof, it's hard, and that's a hard AI problem too. I mean, I wish we could just say, "Hey, AI, go rebuild this thing. Here's all the drawings." Um, that's not happening yet.
Yeah. Um, I agree with that. I think the infrastructure is just not ready. Like, the ecosystems are very disconnected and not designed or built for this to become the reality. Another thing is for AI to change the drawings, specifically for architects and engineers. Right now, it's a little bit of scary moment because who will carry the liability in this case, right? I remember we had a conversation with someone from Autodesk, and we were saying, like, actually, like, there is Autodesk research. I'm sure Autodesk research has a whole bunch of AI tools and solutions, but they're not releasing that for one single reason. The moment the drawings are going to be modified by Autodesk AI, who will carry the liability for that, right? And the same for engineers, right? And I totally agree with that. Like, the maybe the solution might be a different type of kind of like, not paying per seat or something like that, but paying per square foot designed in Autodesk. So that's where you can embed the kind of like liability in this. But it's a whole different conversation. But I agree, infrastructure is not there. It's very disconnected. People use different organizations. They use different workflows. Some will use Revit, some will not use Revit, some will use like something else. Someone is designing in ArchiCAD or some other tools, and they have their conversions and so on, and how the ways they collaborate with engineers of record. And when manufacturing becoming a part of it, and the site planning, right? Site planning typically will accept the PDFs. I haven't, heard of anyone accepting in digital format in terms of, like, the model to be uploaded to the city. But I think it's possible. There is a huge number of benefits to that.
And a couple questions for Alexei. What would you have done differently in terms of product material compliance and certifications with all that you have learned if you were to build a panelized startup? And would you get an ICCES report as early as possible to speed up permitting in a critical growth phase?
ICC, yes, definitely, 100%. For product material compliance certification, I think it depends on the use case. I would say, like, try to find the right partner to do this with, and understand that the incentive on their side. Also, like, do the pushbacks on all additional standards or tests that have been proposed by the experts, right? So it's required. That's maybe, by the way, where AI can help, right? And provide a polite version of, like, why this standard might not be, uh, mm, you know, needed at this stage, for instance, because it's more about relationship, right? If you saying, like, okay, let's evaluate if these standards is truly applicable and what are the cases. Uh, it's yeah, that's two things, but ICCS definitely yes, very
And
helpful.
I'll just, the plug for Kite on this one is that this first question around product and material compliance and certifications, that's kind of right in the like bread and butter of what Kite Compliance does and the AI that we've done, and the experts that we work with, is to make sure that you can get answers a lot faster with a lot more clarity. And when you do start approaching the standards bodies or the testing labs, you're doing so from a position of knowledge and information rather than asking them questions. And I think we've seen that sometimes if you ask the experts the wrong question, you get taken for a little bit of an unanticipated ride. So it's always better to be careful with the questions that you ask.
Yeah.
Um, great. So I think we've got one more question, and then we'll probably call it. So that I think this is a question for Steve. Um, and it's a little bit of a side question that's not necessarily directly related to prefab compliance, but let's ask it anyway. How important is your website in driving business, Steve? Is it the main revenue driver for you guys, or does it work more like a brochure, um, and then prospects get in touch with you on
And I'm
by by
wondering,
by phone?
yeah, I read the question. Is this like a competitor asking, or is this someone that wants to pitch me on a service because our website's bad? It's I think it's very important. Yeah. I mean, as are most websites for, service businesses these days. But look, we're not a product company. It's a consultative sale. We get a huge amount of our business through referrals from architects who design for our system and GCs who build with us. So yeah, but website's important.
Great.
Yeah, I can back that. Like, for B2, Steve, you said that, some of the customers are B2C, right? So B2C, for B2C, it's very important. Like, back from Mighty Buildings early days, we were facing B2C, even B2B, the same, because a lot of people are going to research, like, the project, the predictability, kind of, want to see the products, photos, and so on.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you guys for your time. As a closing note, I think we live in a time where everyone is promising that AI is going to solve everything, and the fear and the hope are kind of at extremes. And um, I think there's not enough discussion about how people who are at the kind of like leading edge actually use these different tools, if at all. So I think that this kind of lifts the curtain up a little bit. Discussions like this as to what the reality is, without the hype, as they say. So thank you guys for your time, and we'll be sure to drop the links into the follow up and send out a recap.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Brian. Thanks,
All right,
Steve.
take care.
Bye.